You're done. With humans, it's more plastic, so that you can, if something happens, you do have the ability to have another relationship if something happens to your spouse. So then, because of that window, it does allow for infidelity and other problems. And so I'm not saying that is the intended. I'm saying because of the amount, because mammary stimulation is a part of our script, it corresponds with the Bible. You know, the Bible's saying, of course, that the ideal is one man, one woman for life. That's the intended. That's the intended plan. Biologically, looking at the script, it looks like there's correspondence with that. It agrees with that. Okay, but are we absolutely monogamous from a biological perspective? No, and that is why we can step outside of that. Now, I do agree there are major consequences, and that's why we're talking about red flags. If you have somebody, for example, the first red flag is someone who is substantially sexually promiscuous, and there is a history of promiscuity before getting married.
And that's our first main red flag of the three.
It is a big red flag.
So we've identified somewhat long-term partnership, what that is.
Right.
And dating, what's the purpose of dating?
Purpose of dating is not, I mean, there are people in our culture, dating refers to messing around, hooking up, you know, basically it's almost a recreational, it's almost a recreational pastime.
Right.
I'm not using it in those terms. I'm specifically referring to dating with the idea that you are going to find that someone that you are going to marry one day.
Right, which helps explain the topic title.
Exactly.
That's
so you're looking for somebody with the capacity for long-term, sustainable, intimate relationship.
Right.
Long-term, sustainable, intimate relationship. Not somebody who's there to hook up, have some fun, and move on.
Right. We're talking about singlehood, really, because if you're looking for a long-term partner, you're single. You're living a lifestyle as a single person. That means you're legally unattached. You're not separated. You are actually in the position to partner with another person. So what are the red flags that we are referring to, and why these three red flags as the main ones? What is the source that determines these three main flags as being such?
All right. Well, first let's name them. Okay. Number one, when you're looking at somebody with a long track record of substantial sexual promiscuity, right? So someone who has basically habitually used sex recreationally. You're talking about a lot of partners, and you're talking about someone who sometimes has multiple relationships going on at the same time, and when you met them, their last relationship wasn't that long ago. Okay, so you're coming along, and they're maybe a year out or whatever, but they've got a long list of people that they've been with. Okay, so that's something you really need to think carefully about. And I'll come back to that. The other red flag is the hothead, and by hothead, I'm talking about someone who has difficulty controlling anger. Usually there's some insecurity at the core there, but when they become threatened or upset, they lose control, and out comes things like verbal abuse. They cross moral boundary lines when angry. Normally they wouldn't do that. They say, well, as long as you do what I want, everything will be fine. As long as things go as I expect, I'm a nice person. But when things go in a way that disappoints or upsets them, they explode and do things that even they think are immoral.
So in a dating relationship, with the potential partners being long-term, if you notice that this person is explosive or is exhibiting that kind of behavior, do you automatically withdraw, or do you analyze it? How long do you endure in the relationship before you pull back and say, whoa, it's time to get out?
Yeah, the whole point of dating is to figure out if this is a quirk, are we looking at a stressor that is just so severe that this comes out under extreme duress, or do they habitually blow up with the slightest problem? Okay, I mean, if you're with them, and let's say, for example, you know, if I'm out with a woman who loses her key or something, and in response to that, she just lights into a string of swear words and starts screaming and blames her mother for it because, you know, and he has to blame somebody. That's a red flag.
Or is it just a bad day?
I'm sorry, that's a red flag. I mean, if you're going to blow up to that, you're going to lose that much control over something that's relatively small. It might be a bad day, it might be one thing, and you're right. You're right about the bad day. Maybe there is a headache, a severe headache, and other things have happened, and that was the last straw. So you bring up a good point. I mean, it could be, and you're right. And that's why you need to get to know the person. Is this because of a bad day, or are you just bad? I mean, bad. All right?
Or do you wait? I mean, does it continue, or do you allow it to continue? Not that it's something that's interesting, but to the point at which it becomes a threat, that you feel threatened. Do you wait until the anger gets to a point that it threatens you?
Well, if the anger is directed, look, when people are in the early stages of a relationship, in the limerence stage, in the romance stage, okay, people are on their best behavior. If they can't keep it together during that stage, you go away. Come on, no. If they can't hold it together then I'm telling you right now what you're in for. Okay, I can give you a lot of stories. I remember I had a patient a while ago who, was miserable, and the whole reason she was coming in, I found out, was because her husband made her life miserable. I mean, he was verbally abusive all the time, had nothing but bad things to say about her. There wasn't any verbally abusive thing he would hold himself back from saying. He said it all. Everything came out of his mouth. And I asked her, because he was so horrible to her and everything, I asked her one time, was any of this, when you were dating the guy, did any of this come out without batting an eye? She said, oh, absolutely. She remembers one time she was over visiting his mother for the first time. And his mother was excited to meet her, and she was getting ready to make herself a bowl of cereal, and she was going to use one of the normal bowls. And her mother said, oh no, let me get down the nice bowls for you. And all of a sudden, this man that she was in love with exploded at his mother, called her a horrible, profane name, and called her a control freak because she wanted to use the good china on her dress. And going, wait a minute, what's wrong with this picture? This explosive anger over very small stimuli is a red flag. All right. And now these individuals, it's oftentimes it can be ego-dystonic anger. And by ego-dystonic, I mean they explode in rage and then they're sorry. Oh, I'm so sorry. Oh, I just lose control sometimes. I really apologize for that.
To the point at which it's convincing.
Yeah, they can be sincere. They start all over again. They have difficulty with self-control. That's a problem. That's a problem. So and the reason this is a red flag, and I'll get into this later when we get to the triangle thing and so forth, but let me go to the next red flag because I'll
So we've mentioned sexual immorality, anger, the hothead, and what's the third one?
The third one is, and it's related to anger, and it has to do with, we call this ego-syntonic anger. And ego-dystonic anger was the explosive, and then I'm sorry later, because they realized they did wrong. In ego-syntonic anger, they're not sorry.
Which is relentless unforgiveness?
Yeah, relentless unforgiveness. These people don't necessarily explode, but they don't forgive. They don't forgive. And let me tell you, when they hate somebody, they do it well. They're very good at hating people. And you pick up on this pretty quick. You mentioned, for example, the brother or the mom, and if you take their position, if you say anything good about them, they're like, well, if you're going to take that position, we're going to have problems, and they're going to let you know right now, oh, no, I hate this individual. I will not tolerate anything positive to be said about this individual. Okay? Nothing. You will never come to the aid of this person. When you see somebody with that much anger directed at a person who is that good at hatred, at not letting go. I mean, it's one thing if somebody, if they got a member of the family that's a serial rapist and child molester and who's, unrepentant, well, okay, you most want to give them a pass. But we're talking about over slights, over issues that are not life-threatening, are not grossly immoral, are not that bad, and yet they're not forgiving.
See, this is why I thought that those two red flags were really two in one. Anger and relentless unforgiveness.
They're related.
They can't forgive because of anger. And but I understand as you're explaining how they're different. And I took a survey. It was a phone text survey, and there was about what people thought the three main red flags were. And as a response, 80% of the responses were the same. It was thought of that deceit, manipulation, and sabotage would be the third would be the third red flag. Well, so you're saying that deceit and manipulation would not be considered one of the 3 red flags,
Okay,
and anger and unforgiveness the same?
I'm not saying that these are exclusive red flags. These are important red flags, and they're usually out there in your face. When it comes to deceit,
And according to what source do you determine that these
well, I was
are?
going to come to this
Okay,
later, because
okay,
basically it comes down to what your goals are for the relationship. If your goal is marriage and long-term intimacy, what I want to show next is how these totally impair that. Okay, and now deceit does too. Deceit wasn't on the list because we ran out of. I mean, I said 3. I didn't say 4.